Publicly, at least, Nicola Sturgeon insists that another Scottish referendum be held before the end of next year. My plans and thinking haven't changed, the Scottish First Minister said last week when asked if the war in Ukraine meant another vote had to be postponed. Her view was supported by Ian Blackford, leader of the Scottish National Party in Westminster, who said last weekend, "Is anyone suggesting that Putin should set the timetable for an independence referendum in Scotland?" The answer to that question is, of course, no. But unfortunately for the SNP, Boris Johnson will determine when or if it will happen, and he remains firmly opposed. Hell will freeze before Boris gives the permission for another referendum, said one of the Prime Minister's close allies. It won't happen under his watch, they say. In the UK, HuffPost UK takes a look at the current state of affairs and assesses the chances of breaking the political deadlock. In last year's Scottish Parliament election, both the Scottish National Party and the Green Party said a vote for them would be a vote on a second independence referendum. Despite having the largest share of votes in the transition period, the Scottish National Party is one seat away from the majority. However, an agreement was reached with 2 members of the Green Stakeholder Board being appointed ministers, ensuring an insurmountable voting bloc for independence at Holyrood. The referendum bill, outlining the Scottish Government's plans for a revote, is tabled at a date to be determined and is guaranteed to come into force given the SNP Greens majority in Parliament. Nicola Sturgeon would then ask the British government to accept or reject the will of the Scottish Parliament. With Boris Johnson unwilling to give Holyrood the legal authority to hold a referendum, as David Cameron did in the original IndyRef case in 2014, the standoff could end with the UK Supreme Court ruling on Westminster's ability to decide or to block another vote. Still, Sturgeon confidants insist they are serious about holding another referendum next year. The main point is that we won mandate after mandate after mandate for another referendum, said one of the MPs. But how clear should the audience be to make it clear? Conservatives go to every election saying they vote to stop IndyRef2, and the people elect the majority of MSPs who support another referendum. I accept that the Constitution is on Boris Johnson's side, but if we deviate from the principle that the ruling party should be able to carry out the manifesto, we are in a strange place. In terms of timing, I think 2023 is quite achievable. I don't think the war in Ukraine means we can start it next year. Well, the Prime Minister should act in the usual way, but we can eventually take the matter to court. I think it's a shame, the MSPs say. However, the MP rejected calls by some nationalists for an unbridled referendum should the Prime Minister refuse to issue a so-called Section 30 order, giving Holyrood the legal power to hold a referendum. They said you can't have a referendum without Article 30. That would be unconstitutional and illegal, and I don't care, neither does the Prime Minister. Well, Boris Johnson could point to the polls to support his claim that now is not the time for another referendum. A recent poll by Savanta Comras found that 59% of Scots, including 43% of SNP supporters, think discussions about the timing of another vote should be postponed because of the war in Ukraine. Meanwhile, a number of opinion polls have also shown that only a minority of Scots want another referendum in the near future. Scotland in Union Chief Executive Pamela Nash said about this, "The people of Scotland have made it clear they do not want another divisive referendum on the dissolution of the UK." Well, I disagree with her there. It's not the people in the UK if it's a small minority. The SNP has not acknowledged his view, just as it did not accept a critical statement in 2014. The fact that nationalists are ignoring the pandemic and the main conflict within Europe while seeking separation is totally irresponsible and wrong. And I think Nash is wrong there. Some nationalists suggest that Sturgeon is simply wooing SNP believers with a constant promise that IndyRef2 is at the gates, while unwilling to actually keep it a secret. Kenny McAskill, a former SNP MSP who resigned from Alex Salmond's ALBA party last year, said Sturgeon has done nothing to prepare for the referendum, although the need for independence has never been greater. He said, "There will be no referendum next year, but that doesn't mean our political leaders shouldn't take steps to protect Scotland from austerity and the cost of living crisis. The referendum would have been possible if Sturgeon had been on it earlier, but it's now clear that Johnson would not issue the Section 30 order," he said. Well, McAskill said there should be a Scottish independence agreement made up of members of Parliament, members of the governing body, and members of the councils, who would then decide how to proceed with the UK's dissolution and hold tasks with the government-led Westminster. Sturgeon loyalists dismiss McAskill's analysis, insisting that Salmond's party represents only 2% of the nationalist movement, not government, they're not in the government. A Sturgeon spokesman told HuffPost UK, "People have already decided that an independence referendum should be held in the Scottish Parliament elections last May, when the SNP was re-elected with the highest share of the vote of any party in the history of transferred power, which saw the election of a record majority the board members who support independence. Any British government that tries to block the will of the people by standing in the way of this ironclad democratic mandate is simply untenable. The UK government knows this, which is why they are so busy preparing behind the scenes for a referendum they know is coming." However, it is true that the SNP still had no real answers on areas such as pensions, the border with England, EU membership, and the currency an independent Scotland would use. It is hard to believe that this would be the case when, in fact, we are only 18 months from another referendum. As the war in Ukraine redraws the geopolitical map, there may be little international support for the disintegration of a member of the United Nations Security Council and an actor in NATO, at least in the medium term, they say. After 15 years at the helm of Scottish politics, Nicola Sturgeon is nearer the end of her career than the start. The prospect of handing her legacy to an independent Scotland seems a little bit more distant at the moment, unless she finally acts. You know that I'm a supporter of another referendum in Scotland and the free choice of the Scottish people, but the government has to act and prepare for the case that they succeed. And finally tell us when the referendum is going to be. And I'll see you in my next video. Bis gleich.